Helen,
Yes.
what do
Hi,
your
Davey.
hi? What do your God bumps feel like?
Well, when you talked to me about this, I had to go back and think about, where that started for me. And I actually took a course from a man named Pete Sanders, who wrote a book called You Are Psychic. And he talked about the 4 ways in which people typically get information in.
Mhm.
And so he was talking about clairvoyance and clairaudience, and clairsentience, and just knowing.
Mhm.
And so I got to thinking about, well, how do those messages come for me? Because everybody's unique in that regard.
Oh yeah.
And so for me, I will get visions. Sometimes I'll get images that
Mhm.
will speak to me.
Mhm.
I'll just sort of see something.
Okay.
I'll get some sort of tingling,
Mhm.
what you talk about as God bumps, sort of that
Yeah.
tingling somewhere in
Mhm.
my body.
Yeah. Images
Um,
are also God bumps. All the senses. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Consider. Yeah.
And he actually talks about how sometimes a scent or a taste will show up.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really something you're really smelling or tasting, but it's a message.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that probably the way that it comes most routinely for me is what he calls knowing,
Mm-hmm.
which is just I'm in a situation and all I have to do is ask, and I know, am I to do this or not to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just an absolute. And sometimes the small me wishes
Oh,
it was a different
yeah.
answer.
I'm starting to get God bumps right now.
Yeah.
So what do they
Yeah.
feel like emotionally?
Wow, that's a good question. There's just a certainty.
Mm-hmm.
There's an absolute clarity.
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've said I've said on occasion that I know what to do. That there's an absolute knowing, and so that there's no anxiety around it any longer. Even if it's not something I really want to do, the um, there's no second guessing. I guess that's
Mm-hmm.
a good way of putting it.
Mm-hmm.
That it's just like, this is what I'm to do. I don't always know why,
Mm-hmm.
but I do know when it's something that's called for, and sometimes I find out after the fact. I was invited to retire when I wasn't expecting to retire from the Food and Drug Administration. And it was a year later, when I was just in December, just before retiring in January, that I found out that I was invited to be a CEO of a small nonprofit, but I had no idea for the 11 months I was preparing to retire
Yeah.
why I had gotten that clear knowing
Mm-hmm.
that I was to retire a couple of years earlier than I anticipated.
Yeah. Very cool. So
So
how often do you get
there's
these God bumps?
oh goodness, that's hard to tell.
Once a day,
Um,
many times a day, once a week, average.
I don't think I can answer that question.
Okay.
I probably a few years ago I might have been able to,
Mm-hmm.
when it first started happening, but there's something about shifting my life to something different than what I just want,
Mm-hmm.
that it's like almost continuous guidance.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll stop and ask, but it's almost like it's continuous, like it's sort of, and it'll if I start to do something different, it'll sort of get louder.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure I'm not missing it. But normally there's just this alignment.
Okay, so is there anything that brings them on all the time, very easily?
Well, I got a sense just now that it is the deep conversations that bring them on.
Mm-hmm.
the conversations about soul and life and death and service and
Mhm.
caring, compassion, love, and those deep conversations, that's pretty consistent.
Mhm. Cool. So is there any way that you can like invoke them or manifest them just all by themselves?
Well, my primary mentor, Bill Bauman, whose wife painted this beautiful picture here
Uh-huh.
that I love. He basically, when I was shifting from, because I was a chemist. I was a physical chemist at the Food and Drug Administration, so very mental,
Mhm.
not exactly God bump
Right.
territory.
Right.
And when I did mentoring with him, and I remember sitting on the back porch with him at one point and saying, I just don't know how to navigate this if my mind isn't making the decisions. And so he said, what he did was he gave me very simple, easy tool. He said, you imagine that one thing is in one hand, one of the possibilities, and that the other is in the other. And if you have three, then you have three hands somehow.
Uh-huh.
And then what you do is you just sort of turn towards each of the possibilities and you just get really still and quiet. And he said, you'll either feel pulled toward it, it'll be neutral, or you'll be pushed away from it.
Mhm.
And he said, it's very reliable.
So that's the
So you just,
way that's the way you use them for decisions. You use them for
Mhm.
guidance that way.
Exactly. As I said, I did that a lot, but did mentoring with him quite a number of years ago. And
Mhm.
so once, I think there's a trust that gets built up that once I won't speak for anybody else, but once I asked for guidance, once I said I wanted to be of service to the universe, I did it that way for a while. And then it happened without my having to, something would show up and it would be like, is this a yes or is this a no? And I would just do what the calling was for. Sometimes, as I say, I would wish the answer were different, but
But-
I went through a very difficult period of time where I kept asking for guidance every day because I wanted something to come to an end.
Mhm.
And I kept getting the message, not quite yet, not yet, not yet. And then at some point, something shifted and it was okay, now you can begin to prepare to leave.
Mm.
And there was something about that period of making the choice to be in alignment with spirit, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, something that we are all part of, that the universal,
Mhm.
against the wishes and the desires of the small s self. That once I made that commitment and I just did it, even against what I really would have preferred, there was something just profound shifted. And it was like, okay, that trust is there. I know it's trustworthy now. I know that I just don't do something different. I
Yeah.
do when the message is there and it's clear. Sometimes, as you say, it has to get your attention
Mhm.
through either a tingling or a voice or something or an image that comes up. Sometimes there's a pause that's necessary to get the attention, but living in accordance with it as opposed to going in another direction um, makes it more readily available, more consistent, more just part of who I have become,
Sweet.
how I live my life.
Oh, you're all connected.
Pretty much.
Okay, thank you, Ellen.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Glad to talk to you, Davey, always.
Yeah.